Hello and welcome to Life Beyond the Numbers, the podcast for those curious about creating a more fulfilling work life. Every business boils down to two basics, people and money. Here we focus on the human side. Numbers matter, but people matter most, and people drive performance. I'm Susan Gjerazi, your host, a coach, consultant, facilitator, and author of Leading Beyond the Numbers. It brings me joy to speak to people and explore together how, although we share many similarities as humans, each of us navigates the world through our own unique lens. This adds intricacy to our interactions and contributes to both the depth and difficulties of interpersonal relationships. Join us for stories, strategies, and insights to help you lead your life beyond the numbers. Hello and welcome to episode 201 of Life Beyond the Numbers. This episode is going out on the last Saturday in April of 2025. And for those of you who listened to episode 200, you'll know that it was a celebration of conversation, of the podcast, of the joy of conversation. And I wanted to continue that celebration somewhat and look at some of the episodes between 100 and 200 and come up with a compilation episode. So I've been going back over my archives into my collection, and rather than just some highlights, I thought I would build the episode around a theme. And the theme is something that I suppose is very prevalent in the work that I do, and that's about becoming aware of the choices that are in front of us when we're faced with a decision or when we're feeling a bit unsure about what to do next, or when we feel unsettled in something that we are doing. So that awareness that there are choices available to us. And oftentimes it can feel like there's no choice, but there's always other choices. It may not be great, but there's always other choices. And recognizing those choices, then we kind of have to express that, don't we? We have to articulate it. We have to give voice to it. And that might be in writing, it might be in speaking, but somehow we will get to a stage where we can say what it is we want, even if that choice isn't immediately available. And then, of course, if we've got awareness and we've articulated what it is we want to do, and we're able to take action, or an action that's aligned with our best interest, with the best option we've chosen. So yes, it's awareness, articulation, action. I do like my bit of alliteration. So I've found snippets from different episodes between episode 100 and 200 to illustrate some of these. And everyone has their own approach, which is also what this episode is about. It's about finding what works for you. Before we kick off with Migena, I'm taking a break from the podcast during the month of May. So there'll be no new podcast episodes during May, but episode 202 will go out in June, and we'll kick off with conversations again. So like I said, Migena is going to start us off today, and Migena covers all three aspects of what I've been talking about here. She doesn't necessarily use the same language that I've used, and she talks about responsibility and taking responsibility, and I really like that as a lens that can be used when we are aware of something in our lives and we know we need to take action.
It's important how we show up in the world. So how much of this responsibility do you take in terms of this thing happened? What's the choice? how do you show up? How responsible are you? First, for the things that happen, and also second, which is, I think it's more important, it's like, what are you choosing to do about them, for the things that happen, right? And also, because what I've realized is very much like, we love, some of us, not all of us, we love to blame, and we love to act as victims, that this thing happened to me. And I think, coming also from Albania, it's a cultural thing a little bit. I can notice it in the whole country, that we tend to have this kind of attitude and mindset, like things happen to us. And moving from Albania, it had become very clear that, hey, you have a responsibility, see how you're building, so how you're showing up, how you're creating the life that you're creating. That's the taking of responsibility and being responsible for what is it that you're creating. So that has also been a huge lesson for me. Instead of pointing fingers, it's turning those fingers around and saying, okay, what's my part in it, right?
Absolutely.
What is it that I'm choosing? Personal vision is something that I'm quite passionate about working, because it's funny enough, I have changed a lot throughout my life, like, and also that vision has changed. So in a way, my life has also taught me not to be attached to just one thing. And that has been like a huge life lesson throughout the years. And also what I've noticed is that I actually, even though like change is the constant, right? We hear that all the time, like change is the constant. And somehow we're very resistant to change. And what I've learned throughout the years is also to embrace this and surrender and trust, which are huge words, and it's a huge work behind it. And I think that has been also my long life lesson to be learned, and still learning, to surrender more and more to that. And also something else, coming back to that, you saying like the vision changing, is, to me, what is really important is, at the right moment, at this particular moment, am I in alignment with, am I in resonance with my values, with what I stand for, with actually what my heart beats for? You know, there is this excitement that I also go after, and which may sound a little bit woo-woo, but it's very much that joy. It's something that drives me. So what brings me that lightness? What brings me that joy? And going after it and trusting that also gut feeling that, okay, this feels good. So I don't know what's coming. And sometimes the vision is not clear. And it's okay. For me, that's what I've learned. It's okay that the vision is not clear, but the first step is clear. And I think that's really what I've learned to trust, knowing that, okay, I'm clear about the first step, and then the second step will show itself. And trusting that, okay, I will know at the end of the day what is right. And apparently I get a confirmation.
I did not know what I wanted to be when I grew up. Law was my second choice, because I did not know what my first choice was. But time waits for no man and no woman, and so, or anyone else for that matter. And so it came time to choose, and both of my parents were lawyers, and they seemed happy enough, so I chose it. When I realized, it's funny you ask, because there was a very specific moment. I was on the worst file ever. Okay, I was a second-year lawyer. I was on the worst file ever. There was a senior associate who was checked out and a little bit grumpy. There was a senior partner who had these high expectations but wasn't helping. The work itself was boring. The client was demanding. I was like, this is the worst file. Like, I've just got the most rotten luck to be on this. And then I got the pens down email. Now, the pens down email says, put your pens down. This deal is done. And so I got the pens down email. The worst file ever was over. And I was thanking my great luck. I was like, this is amazing. The next week, I was on a new file. Same senior associate, different partner, different client. And I was like, no. This file is the worst file ever. Like, me last week was so mistaken. That guy was out to lunch. This file is the worst file ever. But then, would you believe my luck? I got another pens down email. I'm running down the hallway. Like, this is late in the evening, so it wasn't that weird, but running down the hallway to my buddy's office, just celebrating. And then the week following, that first file came back to life and I was put on it again. And I thought, oh, no, no, no. This really is the worst file. Paul last week, who thought he was mistaken. This is the worst file. And I realized that every file was the worst file, and I was only happy in retrospect. And so the thing I was working on, I didn't actually want to do. And it was only afterwards, looking back, that I was like, oh, okay, there was some good. But my life is lived in the moments I'm living it. It's lived in the present. And I realized, like, this is a present I don't want to be in right now. And so I'd followed this map. I'd done as well as I could, gone as high as I could. And I was sitting there as a corporate lawyer making pretty good money for a guy in my mid-20s, wearing like nice Armani suits and Tro Milano Paisley silk ties and whatever, and just not happy with life. And it almost felt as if I was mortgaging my present for the sake of my future. I didn't want to keep doing it, but I kept doing it anyway because I was afraid of doing something else, what the consequences would be of walking away from it.
I think I can speak to that from my own personal experience. It would perhaps be harder for me to speak about that for others, because I wouldn't say I'm an expert specifically in that area, i.e. truth telling. My instinct is that it's not that we can't or we don't tell our truth. I think that just as we grow and we evolve, and who knows, this might be as much to do with Western society and culture than anything, because I don't have another experience of a different culture. But I sense, because I work with this stuff every day, that our truth is there, but it's often buried. And I think we take a number of knocks and bruises in our life. We try to fit in, we try to please people, we try to make money, whatever it is that we're trying to do, lots of trying in there. So we adjust our truth. And I think, like any trajectory, lots of small changes over a long period of time can end up putting you on quite a different heading. You can end up in a completely different place. So I think that from my own personal perspective, talking about my own truth here and my relationship to sound, as you mentioned earlier, and audio and voice and all that good stuff, I was unhappiest when I realized I was most unaligned to my truth. And I wouldn't say I'm always there. I think that it's a constant realignment, like the plane traveling from London to Paris. It knows exactly where it's going, but 98% of the time it's constant realignment. And I think we're all doing that to a greater or lesser extent. But then I think also there's many of us, and this was true for me too, walking the planet, going about our way, knowing that we were heading towards something, not sure what that was, but just being unaware that we weren't living our truth and who we were. And now that I have that awareness, I can't imagine how to navigate that journey without that awareness. So I guess that some of what I do is helping people to become aware that they might just not be speaking or living their truth.
Migena kicked us off, and then we heard from Paul. I suppose with Paul, what I liked is we might voice things, but we're not necessarily acting on them, or we don't always just see the choices that we have, even though we're aware that there's something we want to change. And Rob shows us the little adjustments we've made to our own truth. I suppose we lose ourselves a little bit, and that there's a constant need to recognize that we might be off track and to realign ourselves. And of course, the choice, or becoming aware of the choices, isn't the end of the story, is it? It's often just the beginning. As Sam, who's next, would say, what story am I telling?
What I notice is that when I feel that resistance coming, then just acknowledging it and allowing it to be there is one step on that path towards acceptance. And I don't think we accept from one second to the next. I think it's a process. But I do believe a lot of it is softening to our experience. So softening into what's hard, that helps me anyway. And my dad was such a good teacher when it came to that. So now that we've set the scene, I could read a little poem to invite people into the creative space of our conversation. It's called Eye of the Beholder. Your truths, what makes you beautiful? Which story are you telling? The real and not the dutiful is what makes you compelling. Your voice is such an instrument. May your words be authentic. For when you are in sync with them, they'll feel how much you meant it. We don't need to gloss over it. We don't need to restrain it. Your life, you are the boss of it. Your message, do not tame it. For who you are is immutable. It's time to start rebelling. Your truths, what makes you beautiful? Which story are you telling?
Fulfillment, for me, it means two things that are kind of held in tension and coexist at any given moment. On one level, fulfillment is a journey towards something, right? I want to impact this world. I want to leave the world a better place than I found it. I think there's a real tension there between having a holistic, systemic view of the impact your work has on the world, right? So that's recognizing and taking steps to make sure you're having a positive impact on society, on environment, beyond the immediate of your employees and your customers, right? There's a tension between having that holistic view, but also having the narrower focus required to actually get anything done and drive any progress, right? There's a huge tension, I think, there. And it's almost a tension between whether you care or don't care. What do you care about and what do you choose to not care about, right? Or maybe is it what do you care most about and what are you just passively trying to avoid doing harm around? I think that's a huge challenge right now, because the economic system we've built, it feels like to thrive, to succeed, businesses and individuals need to be really narrowly focused and driven to be able to drive through. But actually, I think we need to broaden our outlook and think a bit more broadly. But I think that's really difficult, and I don't have any answers to that. And I feel that's just the tension that everyone has to navigate, is seeing the bigger picture and understanding and recognizing and being mindful and caring about your impact within it, but then also getting your head down and getting stuff done.
I think the shamans from the Native American people talk about the twin trails, like this whole going inward, going outward, going inward, going outward. And only if we do our inner development, the more we grow internally, we can grow externally, but we can never do the one or the other fully. There's always kind of this lying figure eight of going back and forth. And of course, in our lives, we won't always be in balance. And we have to notice when we're stretching one end and we tap into this other resource more. Part of the systemic coaching and change management in Cologne University, the program I'm helping to internationalize, there's like this work with the inner team, for example. And I think it's a tricky business, and it's so important to be mindful of and kind to ourselves. The understanding, what's our ambition and is it realistic? And can I listen to the inner critic and hear the message, but don't take the attack and make it like a friendly voice of constructive criticism? Or is it deeply suppressed and this tension that's get manifested in our bodies or limiting our ability to maneuver towards our ambition? And again, like, I mean, I am a coach. I'm now helping to lead this new program. And at the same time, I'm not external to myself, right? I do need to recharge and go to retreats or get coaching sessions from colleagues myself, is because that's really difficult work. And you can only get so far with your own reflection and meditation and presencing. I do think sometimes the being in a group with peers and holding each other and sharing, or having someone who is external to ourselves, is invaluable. I think it's innate, is the best I can say. It gives me joy and it makes me feel human. to be part of a community, to provide and create for others. And if I take that to today, and particularly the last 4 years of my work life, where I've deliberately tried to take on most of my projects in the ESG or S and ESG sector, working with a really well-known and very experienced human rights and business consultancy, that was more remote and virtual, but it felt connected to that. I was striving for other ways to bring connection and repair damages or prevent harm in a certain community based on my previous business and consulting background, and bring that to a different sphere of influence. And yes, there's a part of it which kind of cognitively and ethically says this is something that I want to do and I should do. And there is something between purpose and self-interest that I feel like a more whole human being if I make a reasonable, maybe slightly lower income with things that I can, in 10 years, talk to my children about when they ask critical questions with more integrity.
After Sam, we heard from Phil and then Achim. And I think both Phil and Achim are showing us there, well, certainly what I read into, that just because we get to the truth or we become aware, it can still be a mess. It may not be that simple to move forward with things. There can be tensions there between what it is we want to do and what's available to us, or just between different ways of approaching life. And that lack of clarity can feel uncomfortable or unsettling. However, that feeling can often be an opening, a doorway to something else. And getting to clarity may require a different approach than simply thinking. We might have to feel our way there, or we might have to listen slightly differently, or we might have to see things differently. There's no best way or one way to get to our truth, but there's always a first step to take. And often that just begins with that awareness, that noticing, and a pause. And then some other ingredients or tools. And we're going to hear from Carissa about the power of silence, of tuning in. Then we'll hear from Alison about using metaphors as a way to find what it is we're trying to express or act on. And then finally, Robin will talk to us about asking the questions that can get us somewhere. And being in that space that allows the answer we're looking for, or the answer that wants to come out, to emerge.
First, I want to speak to this idea that silence can be frightening, it can be scary. And I want to acknowledge that some people may use silence as a sort of psychological weapon, if you want. I'm not talking about that here. I'm talking about that we can all feel the awkwardness of silence. And one of the reasons it's so awkward is usually we're holding our breath. So one of the ways to invite people into silence is to get them into breath. It's to go into the body. We all know the rise of somatic coaching and body leadership, that it is to allow yourself to really experience silence as an inner resource, something that already sits within you. And to stillness, to really stop. The easiest thing is to focus on breath and to ground yourself by putting and relaxing your feet on the floor. It is that simple, to actually allow the space within, the breath within, and just to be with the experience, whatever it is. The content actually doesn't matter as much. What matters is they're allowing the fullness of the experience without judgment. And then you get to a presence, you get to a sort of authentic presence, and you're able to handle it and hold it, breathe into it, breathe through it, into what wants to emerge next. And this, I think, is the key. Plans are great, but we're working with more and more emergent change. And that's what leaders need to do today, is work out, how do you work with what is there? It's not that the silence starts when you tap into it. It's always there. It's how do we tap into it and use it, listen more deeply to ourselves and to others, and to the everything's energy, the bigger source that is available to bring some insight into whatever we're facing in the moment.
If you imagine being out of your depth, what happens when you imagine the water changing temperature?
Getting hotter.
Yeah. Sometimes that can make the situation, suddenly you pop your head above the water, or it's so warm you want to get out of the water. So I think it's just playing around with the metaphor. But what I think listeners will have picked up on, I hope, is at no point have you needed to tell me any of the situation. And the reason I started using metaphor, one of the reasons, was I am such an argumentative so-and-so. So if you try and tell me, oh, Alison, this is the answer to your problem, I will run rings around, because my logical brain is attached to the reasons why it's stuck. So do not tell me, no, I know I'm stuck, thank you very much. So trying to do it logically, I will defend it so much. And that's not helpful. Whereas metaphor, I've got nothing to defend, because it's just a metaphor, and my brain, inner wisdom goes, yay, yeah, we can talk to her. Here's the metaphor. Yes, just imagine that you're out of your depth in warm water. How does that feel? Actually, I just float to the top when that happens.
Yeah, it's kind of fascinating, isn't it? That you're having a conversation about something that may really be charged for you.
Yes.
And something that you are resisting or whatever, but actually you end up almost childlike with a sense of wonder and awe.
Yes, sometimes you do have to sort of very consciously send that story on a coffee break and say, we're sending it on a coffee break. Dearest logical mind, we will get back to it, and we might even give a time scale, because sometimes our logical brain hates being left behind and will keep going, hello, I'm here, hello.
This is silly, what is she doing?
Yes. So it's the dearest, just trust me, we've been struggling with this for a while. We need some new insight. So I'm just asking you for a coffee break. In a workshop, I'll actually put like a coffee sign for us to all imagine that's where the situation's going. So it invites us to then absolutely be playful, because we're not playing with the story. We're not playing with our attachment to the upset or any of the other emotions. We're not playing with that relationship with that person. We're just playing with the patterns, and our brain just goes, oh. I mean, it is the outcome. Sometimes it might take half an hour, sometimes it may take an hour and a half, and sometimes it can take 2 seconds. But it's just the fact that we see the patterns and we just go, oh, I see.
Absolutely.
That's what I need to do.
So if somebody is going, well, what the hell are those two talking about? The answers are inside of me. I can't find them. I don't know where they are. Where do I start?
For me, it was my WILD acronym. So I was on that journey, like I say, I was pointing fingers and saying all of these things had to change. And I think it was almost to prove that it wouldn't work, I decided I would go down the conventional route. So I went to the doctor and asked for medication. That was a big, fell flat on its face, that one. I went to a counsellor, and basically it was the type of counselling where I just talked about how I was feeling. So I was creating the same situation, the same energy, and it was cycling. It wasn't moving forward at all. So neither of those worked for me. And I thought, what on earth am I going to do? So I started reading. And luckily, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And I just came across some amazing writers. And over the years, these have included Gabor Mate, Brené Brown, Bessel van der Kolk, Matthew Walker now, Abraham Hicks, Neil Donald Walsh, Andrew Cohen, lots of different authors with lots of wonderful perspectives. And some of the things that really, really struck me, though I haven't read a lot of their full works, but Wayne Dyer's When You Change the Way You Look at Things, the Things You Look at Change. Bruce Lipton, the moment you change the way you look at something, the whole of your body chemistry changes. And the whole epigenetics, that was huge for me. So I then went off on an exploration. What is me? What is right for me? Because I realized I had given all of that away. I'd given away my power. I'd given away my knowledge of who I was. So I went off to try and find what that was. And my mum found a therapist who I went to see for a while. And she said once, well, what is it that you like doing? What do you enjoy? And I was in such a miserable place. I just wanted to say nothing. But from somewhere deep inside, when you just ask that question and it just comes at the right time. And I just said, nature. Where did that come from? So she said, right, go home and transform your garden into a wildlife garden. And I thought, well, that's never going to happen, because my husband had said, you don't touch my garden. That's the place where he and his son played kickabout. But his son had got so big that space was too small. So we transformed it, and nature taught me so much through that whole process about seasons, about allowing things rather than forcing things, and so much more. And it brought me towards my WILD acronym, which also is wild, so it connects with nature. And it was learning to see things with childlike eyes of wonder. So Andrew Cohen, he wrote a book, Evolutionary Enlightenment, and that became a 9-month program which I attended, and they talked about beginner's mind. How can you look at the world always through beginner's mind, and not the cynicism and everything that as adults we've so often developed? So W for wonder, I for intuition, so starting to listen to, trust and follow, and the more we do that, the stronger it gets, our voice of inner intuition. L for love, loving ourselves as we are, but also as we are not, because we're so often our own worst critic. And we've taken on board all of these voices, I know I certainly had, that weren't very loving of ourselves. They're not ours. We can let them go once we recognize that that's a voice and it's not ours. So appreciating who we are, but also allowing that we're not the things that we've been told that we should be, or that we see in other people that we want. But also, when you see something in somebody else that you don't like, everybody says, oh, well, you don't like it because it's in you and it's pressing your buttons. Equally, if you see something in another person that you love, that's pressing the buttons that you have too. So you have that. So if you see something that you admire in somebody else, it's within you. You just then can explore and see if you can pull that out more. D is dance with life. Because I realized that I take life far too seriously, as I said. If I could see life as a dance where it's fun, it can flow. The tempo can change, the direction can change. It can feel like 1 step forward, 2 steps back. And it can sometimes feel overwhelmingly fast. Sometimes it feels like, come on, I want to move forward a little bit faster. But I love to dance. I love movement to music. So bringing all of that together and seeing that's what life is. Life is meant to be fun. As Neil Donald Walsh talked about, enjoy. Enjoy with an E means in joy, bringing joy in. It's our choice. We always get to choose how we feel, or the feelings and the thoughts and the beliefs that we want to engage with. Other things will come up, but it's like the Native American story of the 2 wolves. Which do you want to feed? Do you want to feed the stuff that lifts you up, or do you want to feed the stuff that just feels dark and depressing and not uplifting? It's that thing of find what makes your heart sing and follow that. So she somehow managed to connect with what it was that made my heart sing, even though at the time I had no idea, didn't think there was anything. But she somehow, just at the right time, popped the right question, and that came out. And then she kind of gave me permission, encouragement and permission, that was okay to do that. I think I took it as permission to do something for me, which I never had thought I had, because I was one of those, you have to put everybody else first.
We've heard from 9 different people, different stories, different lives, but there's a common theme amongst them all, isn't there? And it's not just the awareness and articulation and action, but it's that through line of truth and living more truthfully, living in a way that's true to ourselves, acting with more intention, connecting more deeply with ourselves and with others. And it's not always about the answers. It's not always about the clarity. It's about recognizing that if you tune in, you may get the next step. You may be able to find something that just helps you along. And another way of doing it is through the podcast. Because what you get in a podcast is you get to listen to 2 people talk about these stories, me and my guest. And so I'd like to finish this episode with something that reminds us of that.
The Tiny Tea House has a, what do you call it, a tagline? Or and that is connect with tea. And that can be different things. It can be connect with the experience of drinking tea, and there can be a gastronomic element to it, a sensory element to it. There's connecting with yourself. So when you slow down to pay attention to things in the moment, then it's often surprising what actually comes up, what emerges. And then the other thing is connecting with other people. So in the tea house, there's space to connect with another person. So you generally ask somebody to invite a friend or partner or another tea lover here. And 3 is a really nice number to create that intimate connection.
James talks about the connection, the intimacy over a cuppa, slowing down and sharing attention and presence. And he talks about 3 being a lovely number. And that just reminded me of you, me, and my guest. 3 of us. Slightly different setting, but of course you can always sit with a cuppa and listen to these episodes, and it can be simply like being in the Tiny Tea House. I hope you enjoyed that episode. Thank you for listening, as always. And as I said in my intro, there'll be no episode during the month of May. We'll be back again in conversation mode from June. Until then, I wish you all joy on your journey to creating more fulfilling work lives. Thank you for joining me today on Life Beyond the Numbers. If something in this episode resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you've enjoyed this conversation, please take a moment to leave a review. It helps others like us discover this podcast and join in our conversation. Until next time, keep exploring the human side of work life.